Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling journey into the forgotten corners of our haunted world. Tonight, we travel into the rugged heart of the Rocky Mountains, where snow-capped peaks cast long shadows over abandoned streets, crumbling saloons, and echoes of lives long gone. Colorado, the land of miners, pioneers, fortune seekers, and dreamers, has more ghost towns than almost any other state in America. These were once thriving places, filled with laughter, toil, and hope. But when the mines dried up and the railroads passed them by, the towns fell silent, leaving only whispers, legends, and restless spirits behind. Tonight, I'll guide you through the 10 most haunted ghost towns of Colorado, each one a place where time seems frozen, where the air is heavy with history, and where the living sometimes cross paths with the dead. So, settle in, dim the lights, and let the mountains speak their secrets. High in the rugged peaks of Chaffee County lies the frozen relic of a once thriving mining town, St. Elmo. Founded in 1880 during Colorado's silver and gold rush, it quickly grew into a bustling settlement of nearly 2,000 residents. The town's main street still survives, its weathered storefronts, saloon, and general store preserved as if waiting for customers who will never return. Tourists who stumble upon St. Elmo marvel at how well it has endured the passage of time. But beneath this picture of historic charm is a reputation far darker than its rustic beauty suggests. For many, St. Elmo is not simply abandoned, it's haunted. The air itself in St. Elmo seems to hum with silence, broken only by the creak of shifting timber or the whisper of mountain winds through empty windows. People who wander its streets often describe a sensation of being watched, as if the townsfolk never truly left but are simply concealed, observing from beyond the veil. Of all the lingering spirits rumored to roam its remnants, one figure has become the most infamous: the ghost of Annabelle Stark. Annabelle belonged to the Stark family, who were among the last permanent residents of St. Elmo. While others fled when the mines closed and prosperity dried up, Annabelle and her kin clung desperately to the place, unwilling to let it slip into obscurity. Known for her reclusive and eccentric nature, she developed a reputation for bitterness toward outsiders. Locals whispered that she was territorial, deeply protective of the general store and the crumbling town she considered her domain. Even after her death, it seems Annabelle was not ready to let go. Visitors report unsettling encounters with a stern-faced woman peering through the dusty windows of the general store. Her gaze, sharp and cold, follows them until they step closer, at which point the figure dissolves into shadow. Some describe her as dressed in old-fashioned clothing, her expression one of contempt, as though furious that strangers dare intrude upon her sanctuary. Paranormal investigators have captured odd fluctuations of energy in and around the store, along with faint electronic voice phenomena, whispers that seem to hiss the word "leave." But Annabelle's presence is not confined to the general store. Guests who walk the quiet streets at twilight claim to hear faint footsteps pacing behind them, though when they turn, the road is empty. The echo of children's laughter has also been reported, though the last child departed the town generations ago. Some attribute this to the spirits of miners' families who once called St. Elmo home, unable to part with the only life they knew. The most chilling reports, however, come from those who linger too long in the old hotel. Though its walls sag and its rooms remain vacant, many claim the building is anything but lifeless. Doors open and slam shut of their own accord. Cold drafts sweep through hallways even on windless nights. Guests have woken to the sound of muffled voices, as if conversations from another century are still taking place in the parlor. One hiker who sought refuge inside swore he heard a piano playing softly in the darkness, a cheerful tune eerily out of place in the otherwise silent ruin. When he lit his lantern, the music ceased instantly, leaving him in oppressive quiet. Winter transforms St. Elmo into something even more otherworldly. Snow buries the streets, and the frozen air turns each exhale into a pale ghost of its own. Many who visit during these months say the atmosphere becomes heavier, charged with unseen energy. Lights have been spotted glowing in the windows of abandoned buildings, flickering as though candles still burn within. Skeptics argue these are reflections of moonlight or tricks of the eye against the snow. But those who've seen them insist the glow was deliberate, pulsing as if alive. Legends have grown around the town's spectral reputation. Some believe Annabelle remains because she is bound by her stubborn will, furious that outsiders now treat St. Elmo as a curiosity rather than a community. Others think the entire town is imprinted with the energy of those who lived, loved, and toiled, their memories replaying like broken records, forever etched into the weathered wood and cracked foundations. Paranormal teams who've set up equipment in St. Elmo often leave with more questions than answers. Strange fluctuations in temperature are common, with icy blasts appearing in otherwise warm rooms. AVP recordings pick up whispers, faint words buried in static, and on rare occasions, a woman's stern voice commanding intruders to go. Some say they've even captured photographs of shadowy figures crossing the streets or watching from balconies. To stand in St. Elmo is to stand between two worlds, the preserved face of Colorado's mining past and the restless echoes of lives that never fully departed. Its stillness is deceptive, for beneath the quiet lies a restless energy that unsettles even the bravest of explorers. The mountains guard it like a tomb, and within that tomb, whispers continue to rise from the shadows. And always, at the heart of it all, is Annabelle Stark, the frozen sentinel of St. Elmo. Whether she is simply a ghost of memory or something far more conscious, her presence endures, stern and unyielding, just as she was in life. Those who dare to wander through the preserved streets often leave with the chilling certainty that she is still there, watching, whispering, and waiting in the silence of the mountains. Nestled just 10 miles south of Aspen, the ghost town of Ashcroft lies quietly among the peaks of the Elk Mountains, a place where silence lingers heavy and the past never truly lets go. Once a booming mining settlement in the late 1800s, Ashcroft rose to prominence during Colorado's Silver Rush. In its heyday, the town boasted more than 20 saloons, several hotels, a post office, and a bustling main street where miners and opportunists alike celebrated their fleeting prosperity. For a brief moment, Ashcroft seemed destined to thrive, its future glittering as brightly as the silver pulled from the earth. But the mountains are as cruel as they are beautiful, and when the mines collapsed and the veins of silver dried up, the town's heartbeat faded almost overnight. By the early 20th century, Ashcroft had become a skeletal remnant of its former self, claimed by snow, wind, and silence. Yet silence is not the only thing that clings to Ashcroft. Stories whispered among hikers, locals, and paranormal investigators speak of figures that never left miners, who trudged into the mountains with hope burning in their eyes and never returned. Men who worked themselves to exhaustion in shafts and tunnels that eventually gave way to darkness and ruin. According to legend, these lost souls still wander the streets and cabins, replaying their endless toil in spectral form. One of the most persistent tales is of the Shrouded Men. Visitors tell of seeing a line of ghostly figures trudging single file through the snow, their bodies bent under the weight of unseen burdens. Dressed in soot-blackened mining gear, faces hidden beneath shadowed hats, they march with the deliberate, wary rhythm of laborers heading to the shafts. Witnesses claim the men never speak, never turn their heads, and never acknowledge the living. They simply march on until, mid-step, they vanish into thin air. The image is chilling phantoms, caught forever in the routine of survival, locked in a cycle of work that no longer has meaning. More subtle, but no less disturbing, are the echoes of voices said to drift through the valleys and mountainsides. Paranormal investigators have reported standing among the collapsed cabins, only to hear muffled conversations rising on the wind, men talking about wages, supplies, or the day's work, as if snippets of time itself were bleeding through the years. The voices often overlap, some jovial, others hushed with exhaustion or tension. When the echoes fade, the silence that follows feels even heavier, as though the mountains themselves are swallowing the sounds of history. It is not only sound that unsettles the modern visitor. The cabins and saloons of Ashcroft seem preserved in a way that feels unnatural, their hollow interiors strangely resistant to total decay. Many have described the sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes following them through doorways and from shadowed corners. Some report feeling sudden drops in temperature, the air turning icy despite the warmth of the sun overhead. Others recount the sensation of brushing against someone while standing alone in an empty room. But perhaps the most chilling account comes from a group of campers who pitched their tents near Ashcroft one winter evening. They told of seeing lantern lights flickering across the snow, bobbing in careful formation as if carried by men walking in a line. The lights moved with eerie precision, climbing the ridge in single file. Believing perhaps that they were witnessing other campers or late-night hikers, the group decided to follow. As they drew closer, the lights seemed to grow dimmer, as though receding into the distance, despite the campers' steady pace. When they finally reached the ridge, there was nothing, only untouched snowdrifts, pristine and empty. Yet the sense of being watched grew stronger, pressing down on them like a physical weight. They later swore they could feel the cold gaze of dozens of eyes from the tree line, though not a single figure was visible. Skeptics dismissed these accounts as tricks of the wind, light, or imagination in an environment already rich with atmosphere. The creak of old timbers, the shifting of snow, or the isolation of the high mountains can play with the senses in ways both powerful and unsettling. But those who have stood in Ashcroft at night, listening to phantom conversations or watching lanterns vanish into the dark, are convinced the town is more than abandoned. What remains of Ashcroft is both picturesque and haunting. Tourists often wander its frozen streets during the day, marveling at the preserved storefronts, log cabins, and the bones of an era long gone. But when the sun dips behind the peaks and shadows stretch across the snow, the town takes on a different character. Its silence deepens, its emptiness grows heavier, and the whispers of the past seem to breathe through the very air. Ashcroft is more than a relict, is a liminal place, standing at the crossroads of history and myth, the living and the dead. Whether the shrouded men are restless spirits of miners who refuse to leave, or echoes of a time that refuses to fade, the effect is the same. Ashcroft is alive with memories that refuse to die. In the crisp mountain air, where the snow muffles every step and the wind carries voices no one can explain, the town becomes something beyond a ruin. It becomes a reminder that some places never let go of their stories, and some shadows never fade with time. High in the Rockies, where the air thins and storms descend with little warning, lies the ghost town of Independence. Perched at over 10,900 feet on Independence Pass, this place was once the crown jewel of Colorado's gold rush, a town built on dreams of wealth and prosperity. Founded in the late 1870s after gold was discovered nearby, the settlement grew almost overnight. By the mid-1880s, its population swelled to more than 1,500. Its streets lined with general stores, boarding houses, saloons, and the constant hammering of pickaxes, echoing from the mountainsides. Yet, as with so many towns of the era, prosperity was fleeting, and the elements would prove to be more merciless than any vein of silver or gold was generous. Independence was not just remote, it was a town trapped by geography. The passes that connected it to the outside world were treacherous even in the best of weather. When winter came, they became nearly impassable. Supplies grew scarce, and snow often buried the cabins to their roofs. Residents were forced to rely on whatever meager stores they had managed to gather before the storms arrived. And when those ran out, desperation soon followed. It was here that tragedy left its mark, an indelible stain of hunger, fear, and death that many believe has never fully lifted. Local folklore speaks of the blizzards that swept across the town. Blizzards that did not just freeze men to the bone, but starved them into silence. Some accounts say miners trapped in these storms resorted to tearing apart their own homes for firewood, splintering the walls that once protected them. Others whisper darker rumors that when food supplies dwindled and starvation loomed, some turned on one another in unspeakable acts of survival. Whether truth or rumor, the shadows of those who perished are said to linger still. Hikers who braved the pass, even in modern times, tell of strange encounters among the crumbling remains of cabins. Many describe the sensation of being watched, of footsteps crunching in the snow behind them, though no one is there when they turn. Figures are often reported trudging slowly through the drift's shadowy forms, hunched forward as though bearing the unbearable weight of hunger and despair. Their outlines fade like smoke, leaving behind only silence and the uneasy realization that they may not have been entirely human. One of the most chilling tales comes from a lone traveler who sought shelter in Independence during a sudden storm. Caught in the blinding snow, he stumbled into one of the half-collapsed cabins, lighting a small fire to stave off the cold. Exhausted, he drifted into uneasy sleep. When he awoke in the middle of the night, the cabin was still freezing, the fire nearly dead. But he was not alone. Around the cold iron stove sat several gaunt figures, skeletal in appearance, their hollow eyes fixed intently upon him. They did not speak, nor did they move, but their presence filled the cabin with a suffocating dread. Terrified, the man screamed, stumbling back into the snow. In that instant, the figures collapsed into dust, leaving nothing but empty air and the creak of the storm pressing against the wooden walls. He fled before dawn, and though he survived, he never returned to the mountains again. Paranormal investigators who have since ventured into Independence tell of other strange happenings. Disembodied voices echo across the pass. Snippets of conversation carried on the wind as though miners are still discussing their prospects, their hopes, or their final meals. Lantern lights are said to flicker on the ridges, bobbing through the snowdrifts in solemn procession, yet when followed, they vanish into the white. Some claim to have captured faint apparitions on camera, gaunt men with hollow faces, their clothing tattered and rimed with frost. Others describe the overwhelming smell of smoke and rot in cabins long abandoned, a scent that vanishes as quickly as it comes. Even in the brightness of summer, the ruins of Independence feel eerily still. The cabins, weathered and skeletal, seem to hold their breath, waiting for the return of winter. The wind whistles through broken timbers like a dirge, and the silence of the surrounding peaks weighs heavily on those who pass through. Yet it is when the snow falls that the atmosphere becomes most oppressive, as though the land itself remembers the suffering etched into its history. Travelers on the pass often report feeling an inexplicable heaviness during storms, a deep sadness that settles into the bones, as though the mountain itself mourns the lives it once claimed. Skeptics dismiss these tales as tricks of altitude and imagination, the mind unraveling in the thin air and solitude. But for those who have experienced the strange and the unexplainable, in Independence, the truth feels undeniable. Something lingers there, something bound to the snow and the silence. Unable or unwilling to move on, the town may be abandoned, its people long gone, but the echoes of their suffering remain. Independence stands today as more than a relic of the gold rush. It is a monument to the unforgiving power of nature and the fragility of human ambition. The mountains gave fortune, and the mountains took it back, leaving behind only whispers in the snow and the shadows of those who never escape the blizzards. For those who venture into the ruins, the line between past and present grows thin, and in the stillness of the storm, when the snow swallows every sound, one might just glimpse the gaunt miners of Independence trudging eternally through the drifts, forever caught in the tragedy of the blizzards. Tincup, nestled high in Gunnison County, Colorado, was a town forged in chaos and survival. In the late 1800s, it was a rough-and-tumble mining settlement, brimming with saloons, gambling dens, and outlaws who preferred to settle disputes with pistols rather than words. The law was fleeting, justice was often personal, and death came suddenly. Shootings in the muddy streets were so common that locals joked the undertaker was the busiest man in town. Today, the mines are long gone and the streets are empty. But the most haunted remnant of Tincup is not its collapsing buildings or deserted streets, it is its cemetery. A lonely resting place on a hill above town, where the dead do not always rest. The Tincup Cemetery is divided into 3 distinct sections, reflecting the divisions of life that carried into death. There is the Protestant section, the Catholic section, and the notorious Boot Hill, reserved for those who met violent Enzatalos, drifters, and men gunned down in saloon fights. The markers that remain are crude wooden crosses, weather-beaten headstones, and hand-carved inscriptions, many leaning or nearly consumed by the earth. Standing among them, one can feel the weight of history pressing close, as though the spirits of those who died hard deaths refuse to release their grip on the land. Visitors who make the trek to the cemetery often report strange phenomena. At night, ghostly lights flicker among the graves, moving in slow, deliberate patterns, as though lanterns were being carried by invisible hands. Some describe the lights as a pale blue glow, others as warm orange flames that suddenly wink out when approached. These lights are often accompanied by a sound that carries eerily on the wind, soft weeping, like that of a grieving woman, though no one is ever found. The combination creates an unsettling atmosphere, leaving even hardened hikers reluctant to linger after dark. One of the cemetery's most infamous legends is that of the cowboy apparition. Many claim to have encountered him wandering among the graves, a tall figure in a wide-brimmed hat, with spurs that clink faintly as he walks. Witnesses say they hear his boots crunching in the dirt, the sound sharp and clear, yet when they look down, no footprints remain in the soil or snow. He is often seen moving slowly between headstones, pausing as if searching for a particular grave. Some believe he was a gunfighter, buried in Boot Hill, forever condemned to wander the place where so many like him were laid to rest. Others say he was a drifter who was murdered without cause, left restless because no one remembers his name. Campers who spend the night near the cemetery describe even stranger encounters. On quiet nights, the stillness of the valley is suddenly broken by phantom gunshots echoing across the hills. The reports are consistent: the sharp crack of pistols or rifles fired in rapid succession, followed by silence so profound it feels suffocating. Some say these are echoes of the lawless days of Tinkup, a ghostly replay of shootouts that once filled the town with fear and blood. Other visitors have told of being overcome by sudden, intense emotions while standing among the graves. Some feel waves of sorrow so powerful they bring tears without reason. Others report a rush of anger or dread, as though they have stumbled into the middle of a feud, still raging long after death. Paranormal investigators who have visited the site have captured chilling audio evidence: whispers carried on the wind, faint conversations that seem to come from nowhere, and names called out in voices that do not belong to the living. Perhaps the most unnerving tale comes from a pair of hikers who camped near the cemetery one summer night. They awoke to see several figures standing just beyond their tent, silhouettes barely visible in the moonlight. The shapes appeared to be men, their hats pulled low, their shoulders stooped as though carrying the weight of the past. The hikers described a heavy silence, broken only by the crunch of unseen boots circling their camp. Terrified, they stayed inside their tent until dawn. When they finally emerged, they found no footprints in the dirt, no sign that anyone had been there, but the sound of spurs and boots still echoed in their minds. Local residents, few as they are, tend to avoid the cemetery after dark. They speak of its haunted reputation with a mix of respect and caution, insisting that the spirits buried there remain active and unsettled. Many of those laid to rest met violent ends, some unclaimed, some buried without ceremony. It is said that souls denied peace in life rarely find it in death, and in Tinkup, that belief holds strong. The cemetery stands today as a reminder of the lawless days that shaped the town, a place where history and legend blurred. The wooden crosses lean under the weight of years, but the stories endure. Those who visit Tinkup's cemetery at night often leave with a sense that they were not alone, that unseen eyes followed their every step, and that the restless spirits of a bygone age still walk among the graves. Tinkup may be a ghost town in the truest sense, but it is not entirely empty. For in the silence of the cemetery, where the wind whispers through tall grass and the mountains loom cold and unyielding, the dead still keep watch, their presence felt in every flicker of light, every phantom footstep. The spirits of Tinkup linger, restless and eternal, a chilling testament to a town that once lived fast, died hard, and never truly let go. High in the Elk Mountains of Colorado, buried deep in snow for much of the year, lies what remains of Gothica, once striving silver town that sprang up almost overnight during the feverish mining boom of the late 1800s. At its peak, Gothic was a bustling hub, filled with saloons, hotels, stores, and the endless clamor of miners striking their picks into the frozen earth in search of silver riches. Yet just as quickly as it grew, Gothic withered. When the mines closed and the silver market collapsed, the residents abandoned their homes to the relentless winters. Now, only a handful of skeletal buildings remain, their roofs sagging beneath the weight of snow, their windows staring blankly across a valley that feels untouched by time. Those who wander here today describe Gothic as more than just abandoned. It feels haunted, as though the town itself resents being forgotten. The silence is crushing, broken only by the crunch of boots in snow and the whistle of the wind sweeping through the hollowed-out streets. Many visitors swear that the emptiness is deceptive, that unseen eyes watch from doorways, and that the brittle wood of the cabins still carries echoes of lives once lived within them. One of the strangest phenomena reported in Gothic is the flicker of eerie blue lights across the mountainsides. On frigid nights, hikers and skiers tell of seeing glowing orbs dancing high among the ridges, weaving between the trees as if guided by intelligent hands. Some say they are lanterns, carried by the restless spirits of miners who perished in avalanches or froze in the long winters while searching desperately for veins of silver that eluded them. The lights appear suddenly and vanish without warning, often leaving the witness with a strange buzzing in their ears and the sensation that they have brushed against something not of this world. There are also the phantom riders, shadowy figures mounted on horseback, spotted most often during heavy snowstorms when visibility is low. They emerge from the swirling white as silent silhouettes, their horses moving without sound, their riders' faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats or scarves. Just as quickly, they dissolve back into the blizzard, leaving no tracks behind in the deep snow. Locals claim these riders are the spirits of Gothic's townsfolk, who once braved the mountain passes in life, only to succumb to the unforgiving winters. To encounter them is said to be a warning that the storm you are in may turn deadly if you linger too long. Perhaps the most chilling tale connected to Gothic comes from a photographer who visited in the mid-20th century, long after the town had become a husk of its former self. He was captivated by the desolation of the place and set up his camera to capture the ghostly beauty of the snow-cloaked ruins. As he framed the shot of the main street, he noticed movement through the viewfinder. A man, dressed in 19th century clothing, standing rigidly in the distance. The figure appeared blurred, as though the blowing snow obscured his features, but the photographer distinctly remembered the hollow, sunken eyes that seemed to lock onto his own through the lens. Startled, he lowered the camera, only to find the street completely empty. No figure, no footprints, nothing but an unbroken stretch of snow. Convinced he had imagined it, he developed the photograph later, only to discover that the figure had been captured on film. The blurred outline of a man stood in the center of the street, his gaunt face fixed in a lifeless stare. The photograph became an object of fascination, terror for the man who took it. He refused to return to Gothic ever again, claiming the eyes of the apparition haunted his dreams for years afterward. Even modern travelers feel the same oppressive atmosphere when they set foot in Gothic. Campers in the nearby wilderness report waking to the sound of faint voices carried through the icy air, as though miners still call to one another from beyond the grave. Others have spoken of hearing the sharp clang of metal, echoing through the canyon's pickaxes striking rock where no living miner labors. The air itself in Gothic seems to hold memory, saturated with suffering, greed, and abandonment. What makes Gothic especially unnerving is how the landscape contributes to its spectral presence. The mountains rise like jagged teeth, catching storms that seem to linger for days, trapping visitors in sudden whiteouts. The cold is unrelenting, seeping into bone and spirit alike, and many who have ventured into Gothic's ruins claim that the air grows unnaturally heavy, almost suffocating, when the sun sets. In those moments, the world feels thinner, as if the past and present overlap. Some have described glimpses of miners trudging down the street, horses tied outside the saloon, the faint glow of lamplight seeping from long-collapsed windows, visions that fade like smoke as soon as one tries to approach. Despite its decay, Gothic retains a strange allure, drawing in historians, ghost hunters, and curious hikers alike. To walk its snow-buried streets is to step into a place where time has fractured, where echoes of life and death bleed through the silence. Gothic is more than just a forgotten silver town. It is a frozen graveyard of memory, its phantoms still bound to the snow and stone, endlessly repeating the struggle that defined their short, harsh existence. Some say Gothic is cursed, a place where ambition met the unyielding brutality of nature, and where human spirits proved too stubborn to rest. Others believe the phantoms are not malevolent, but simply lost, trapped in the same blizzards that ended their lives. Whatever the truth, Gothic remains one of the most haunted places in Colorado, a frozen town of phantoms, standing as a chilling reminder of how quickly life can be swallowed by the mountains, leaving only shadows and whispers behind. High in the San Juan Mountains, where avalanches rumble like distant thunder and the snow never seems to truly melt, lies Animas, Forks, a ghost town preserved by isolation and time. Once, this place was alive with the sound of hammers striking rock, wagons creaking under the weight of ore, and the laughter of children who played along the muddy streets. Now, it stands as a skeleton of its former self, a cluster of weathered cabins and silent buildings against a backdrop of rugged peaks. But among these ruins, there is one structure that captures both fascination and dread: the Duncan House. Its large bay windows still reflect the sky like unblinking eyes, and to many who dare approach, it is far more than just an abandoned home. It is the House of Screams. The story of the Duncan House is stitched together with history, rumor, and the whispers of those who claim to have experienced its horrors. Built in the 1870s during the Silver Boom, it was considered one of the grandest homes in the town. With 2 stories, spacious rooms, and windows that let in the sweeping views of the mountains, it was a place of pride. But pride quickly turned to tragedy. Local legends claim a miner named Robert Duncan, who lived there with his wife and 2 children, descended into madness when the veins of silver he pursued ran dry. Some say he grew violent, others that he simply snapped during a harsh winter when food grew scarce. According to the tale, one night he slaughtered his family in the house and then vanished into the mountains, never to be seen again. The walls of the Duncan House, it is said, still echo with the cries of his victims. Visitors who enter the creaking doorway often describe a feeling of immediate unease, as though unseen eyes are watching. Even in summer, when the mountain sun is high, the interior feels unnaturally cold. Photographers who set up their cameras to capture the view through the bay windows sometimes hear what sounds like footsteps on the floorboards behind them. Though the house is undeniably empty, a number of tourists have reported their equipment malfunctioning inside, batteries draining without explanation, only to work again once they step back outside into the mountain air. Most chilling of all are the screams. Dozens of people have claimed to hear them, piercing, desperate, and heart-wrenching. They say the cries seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, reverberating through the house at dusk, just as the sun dips behind the ridges and shadows crawl across the town. Some insist the screams belong to the children, high-pitched and terrified, while others believe they are the wails of the wife. A few have even reported a deeper, guttural sound, almost like a man's roar of anguish, accompanying the shrieks. The screams often stop as suddenly as they begin, leaving behind an oppressive silence that feels heavier than any noise. In winter, when the snows bury the town and Animas Forks becomes accessible only by snowmobile, the Duncan House takes on an even more terrifying reputation. Snowmobilers riding past after dark have sworn they've seen a figure standing in the bay window. Sometimes it appears as a tall man, rigid and unmoving, staring out at the empty street. Other times, it looks like the silhouette of a woman or even a small child. Riders who have been brave enough to stop and investigate say the figure always vanishes before they can reach the door, leaving only the stillness of snow and wind. Skeptics dismiss the stories as tricks of the wind in the valley, the shifting of old timbers in the cold, or the play of light through warped glass. But too many accounts echo the same details for believers to ignore. One particularly disturbing story comes from a hiker who camped near the town one autumn night. Just before midnight, He claimed he was awoken by the sound of a blood-curdling scream that seemed to slice through the air. Grabbing his flashlight, he stepped outside his tent and saw the Duncan house illuminated faintly by moonlight. In the upper window, he swore he saw a pale face staring out at him, mouth open as if in mid-scream. Terrified, he left his camp behind and hiked back down the mountain in the dark, never returning to Animas Forks. Even locals from the nearby towns, who often roll their eyes at ghost stories meant for tourists, hesitate to spend too much time around the Duncan house after dark. Some refuse to go near it at all, claiming the land itself feels wrong, as though steeped in the grief and rage of whatever happened inside those walls. Today, Animas Forks remains one of Colorado's most photographed ghost towns, its haunting beauty drawing travelers and history buffs from all over. The Duncan house, with its prominent windows and lingering atmosphere of sorrow, often becomes the centerpiece of their visits. But many who arrive curious leave unsettled, their cameras filled with strange distortions, their ears still ringing with phantom cries, and their hearts heavy with the impression that they had not been alone. High in the rugged San Juan Mountains, near Telluride, sits Alta, a once thriving mining town that has now been reduced to little more than crumbling wooden structures, leaning cabins, and collapsing shafts. In its heyday, during the late 1800s, Alta was alive with the sound of picks striking rock, wagons rattling over uneven roads, and the deafening thunder of dynamite charges as miners blasted their way into the mountainsides in search of silver and gold. Life here was harsh, the work unforgiving, and death was never far from the men who braved the mines. Accidents were common: collapsing tunnels, avalanches sweeping through the camps, and dynamite mishaps that left men maimed or killed instantly. Though the mines closed long ago, many say the echoes of that violent past still linger in Alta. Visitors who trek up to the ruins report a strange unease, as if the town is holding on to its pain. Hikers and ghost hunters alike have spoken of hearing phantom explosions rolling across the mountainsides, sharp and concussive like dynamite tearing rock apart. These sounds are often followed by what chills people most: the agonized screams of men, their voices desperate and panicked, carrying through the thin alpine air. Yet when the sounds are investigated, there is nothing to be found. No smoke, no fire, no workers, only empty silence, broken by the wind. One of the most unsettling reports came from a group of hikers who set out early one summer morning to explore Alta's ruins. They described pausing by the remnants of a mine shaft when, without warning, the air shook with a deep, echoing blast. Rocks tumbled from the mountainside as if shaken loose by the explosion, and then they heard the unmistakable shouts of men, their voices rising in panic, calling out names and warnings. Terrified, the hikers scrambled for cover, certain that a real collapse had occurred nearby. But when the echoes faded and they looked around, the mountains were quiet again. There was no dust cloud, no injured miners, no sign of recent disturbance. They had been alone the entire time. It is not only sounds that haunt Alta. Many visitors speak of cold spots that linger even under the warm summer sun, patches of air that feel heavy and oppressive, as though charged with unseen energy. Cameras often malfunction here, batteries draining rapidly as though something feeds on their power. Locals who have braved the area at night insist that the ruins take on an otherworldly presence after dark, the shadows stretching unnaturally long, as if hiding figures that refuse to step into the open. Perhaps the most chilling legend of Alta centers around a mysterious figure often spotted walking among the ruins. Witnesses describe him as tall, wearing a long black coat that seems oddly formal against a backdrop of decayed cabins and shattered timbers. His face is never clearly seen, often obscured by shadow, even in broad daylight. But those who catch a glimpse of him describe an overwhelming sense of dread that grips them, a despair so heavy it feels suffocating, as if the air itself thickens in his presence. Some speculate that this phantom could be the spirit of a mine foreman, perhaps one who carried the guilt of sending men to their deaths in dangerous tunnels. Others believe he may be a victim of one of the countless accidents, a soul trapped in the ruins, forever pacing the place where his life was violently taken. One legend suggests that he was a lone prospector who set off a charge too close to himself. His body never recovered from the blast. Now, he walks the abandoned town, a reminder of the cost of greed and desperation. There is a particularly unnerving story told by a pair of snowmobilers who passed through Alta one winter. The town was buried under heavy drifts, the cabins sagging beneath the weight of ice and snow. As they cut their engines to rest, they both heard a deep, booming detonation that rattled the snow around them. Startled, they looked toward the mountainside and saw, just for an instant, a figure standing among the ruins. He was motionless, tall, draped in black, staring at them from the distance. They waved, shouted, even thought perhaps it was another explorer. But before they could approach, the figure vanished. The only sound left was a soft whisper of the wind sweeping through the empty town. Even those who do not see or hear anything physical often leave Alta with a heavy impression, as if the land itself remembers the tragedies carved into its soil. The ground seems to hum with a restless energy, and many describe leaving with headaches, chills, or a persistent feeling of being followed until they are far down the mountain roads again. Alta is now nothing more than a collection of rotting timbers, sagging mine entrances, and broken stone foundations. Yet within those ruins is an atmosphere unlike any other ghost town in Colorado. The phantom sounds of dynamite still roll across the peaks. The cries of men echo as if suspended in time. And the tall man in the black coat waits among the wreckage. For those who dare to wander through Alta, the past does not stay buried. Here, history still speaks, sometimes in a whisper, sometimes in a scream, and sometimes in the earth-shattering roar of dynamite that never fades. High in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado lies the forgotten ghost town of Capital City, a place with dreams larger than life and a history drenched in ambition, disappointment, and lingering echoes of rage. The town was the vision of one man, George Lee. In the late 1800s, Lee set his sights on building not just another mining town, but a grand community that could rival Denver itself. He poured his wealth and determination into carving a settlement out of the wilderness, complete with a massive stone mansion that towered over the modest wooden homes of miners and settlers. His goal was nothing less than to make Capital City the capital of the state of Colorado. But dreams that bold often end in ruin, and Capital City today is nothing more than a handful of decaying structures, its silence broken only by the mountain winds and the restless ghost of George Lee, the governor who never was. Visitors who make the long trek to the remains of Capital City often say the air feels unusually heavy, as if the very earth remembers the weight of Lee's failed ambition. His mansion, though crumbling, still dominates the ghost town like a monument to lost dreams. Its empty windows stare out at the mountains like blackened eyes, and many who step inside report an immediate sense of being watched. The story goes that George Lee never left his home, his spirit bound to the stones he laid with his own hands. Those who believe in the hauntings say his ghost is not a quiet presence. Hikers and explorers have described seeing a tall, stern figure pacing the broken floors of the mansion, dressed in the fashion of the late 19th century. His voice has been heard muttering in the dark, sometimes indistinct, but other times sharp and furious, condemning words about betrayal, failure, and lost glory. It's said that Lee had written speeches, planned governmental halls, and even designed streets for a grand capital city that never came to be. When those dreams crumbled with the decline of mining in the area, so too did his sanity. Perhaps the most chilling reports are those from people who claim to feel his despair as if it were their own. Hikers recount stepping through the ruined doorway, only to be overwhelmed by a crushing sense of hopelessness. Perfectly rational people describe sinking into sudden despair, their minds clouded with thoughts of futility and wasted effort, as though George Lee's emotions had seeped into the very walls of his house. Some cannot stay inside more than a few minutes before fleeing into the open air, shaken and deeply unsettled. Stranger still are the lights. Capital City has no power, no connection to modern infrastructure, and yet, at night, passers-by often report glowing orbs or flickering lights appearing in the windows of Lee's mansion. Some describe them as the steady, warm glow of lanterns. Others say they resemble wild, erratic sparks, like a fire dancing out of control. Paranormal investigators who camped near the ruins captured photographs of strange illuminations in the upper windows, illusions that vanished the moment anyone approached the building. EVP recordings taken in the mansion only deepen the mystery. In several sessions, voices have been captured that do not belong to the living. In one famous recording, a deep male voice growled, "Leave this place," startling even the most hardened investigators. Others have picked up murmurs that sound like angry speeches, as though George Lee is still delivering proclamations to an audience that never arrived. One chilling account tells of a group of hikers who left their recorder running overnight inside the mansion. When they reviewed the audio, they heard hours of silence, broken occasionally by footsteps pacing, a chair scraping, and finally, a frustrated voice shouting a single word: "Why?" Legends have grown around Lee's haunting. Some locals believe his ghost is bound not by anger but by obsession, forever clinging to the dream of power and recognition that was denied him. Others whisper that the mansion itself is cursed, that Lee poured so much of his soul into its construction that it became a vessel for his spirit, unable to release him, even in death. The surrounding ruins of Capital City echo with similar tales, phantom figures seen on the old streets, disembodied voices in the tree spot. The mansion is always the heart of the story, the dark epicenter of energy. Winter intensifies the atmosphere. When snow buries the ghost town in silence, the mansion becomes a stark, shadowy figure on the landscape. Snowmobilers traveling through the pass report seeing movement in its windows, a man's silhouette shifting from room to room. Once, a group swore they saw a man standing on the balcony, staring down at them with cold intensity. They waved, assuming it was another traveler. But the figure never moved, and when they approached, they found the balcony empty, covered in untouched snow. Capital City is no longer a town, but George Lee refuses to let it fade into obscurity. His phantom presence keeps the memory alive, though twisted into something darker than he ever intended. His mansion is both a monument and a tomb, its decaying walls sheltering the echoes of a dream so strong it could not be silenced, even by death. Travelers who come to Capital City do so at their own risk. Many leave with stories of whispers in the dark, glowing lights, and overwhelming despair that does not belong to them. But some leave with nothing but silence, wondering if the tales are exaggerations. Perhaps Lee only chooses to reveal himself to those he feels share his pain, or to those who dare to mock his failure. Whatever the case, Capital City remains haunted not only by a man's ghost, but by the weight of what might have been. High in the Colorado mountains lies the ghost town of Vicksburg, once a thriving mining settlement known for its neat streets, lined with tall cottonwood trees planted by the hopeful pioneers who carved their lives into the wilderness. At its height in the late 1800s, the town bustled with miners, shopkeepers, and families who dreamed of building something permanent in the unforgiving mountains. The sound of pickaxes against stone, the ringing of hammers, and the voices of children echoed down the tidy avenues. Today, the cottonwoods still stand, swaying gently in the mountain winds, but the people are long gone. What remains is a place eerily well preserved, silent to the ear till the past seems to stir. For those who visit, Vicksburg is far from empty. It carries whispers of laughter, flickers of movement, and echoes of life that should have faded long ago. Many who wander through the streets of Vicksburg describe hearing the unmistakable sound of children at play. High, joyful laughter drifts across the dirt roads, though no children are there. The echoes often come from seemingly nowhere, bouncing between the deserted houses and fading into the trees at the edge of town. Some claim to have seen ghostly children, themselves translucent figures, bending over the dirt to play marbles, their small hands scattering glass orbs across the ground. Just as suddenly, the figures dissolve into mist when approached, leaving the street empty once more. The ground, however, sometimes holds faint impressions, small footprints pressed into the dirt, as though children had only just been there. The old schoolhouse is said to be the heart of the activity. A plain wooden building weathered by time, its windows clouded and frames worn, It stands like a stubborn reminder of Vicksburg's brief but lively era. Visitors stepping inside often describe a strange heaviness, as though they've interrupted a lesson that never ended. Some paranormal investigators have reported finding chalk words appearing on the blackboard, even though no hand touched its simple lessons or arithmetic problems scrawled in faint, ghostly handwriting. Others have witnessed books tumbling from the shelves on their own, the sounds startling in the otherwise still air. One group even claimed to hear the faint shuffle of children's feet against a wooden floor, followed by the creak of desks as if unseen pupils shifted in their seats. Perhaps most unsettling is the sound of the school bell. The bell, silent for over a century, has been heard ringing clearly by hikers and campers who pass near the town. Some say it tolls only once, sharp and lonely, while others claim to hear it ringing insistently, as though calling students back to class. Paranormal researchers have tried to explain it away as echoes carried by the mountains, but those who have heard it swear the sound is too close to real. When they check, the bell itself remains still, rusted and frozen in place. Locals and historians have long speculated about why the laughter of children lingers in Vicksburg. Some suggest it was the energy of youth imprinted into the very soil by the joy of those who once lived there. Others whispered darker theories. In the late 1800s, mining towns were dangerous places. Disease swept through them easily, and avalanches or accidents could wipe out families in a single day. Some believe a tragedy struck the children of Vicksburg, perhaps an epidemic that claimed their lives, leaving their spirits bound to the schoolhouse and the streets where they once played. Whatever the truth, their presence is felt most strongly when the sun dips below the peaks and the twilight shadows stretch long between the cottonwoods. Visitors have shared chilling personal accounts. A hiker recalled stopping in town at dusk and hearing a chorus of laughter, so loud and close that he was certain children were running behind him. When he turned, the street was empty, though the dust at his feet stirred as if disturbed by running figures. Another traveler claimed she saw 3 children sitting on the steps of the schoolhouse, their faces pale but smiling. They vanished when she raised her camera, leaving only an empty staircase in her photo. Even more unnerving are reports of people feeling tugged or pulled by unseen hands. Parents visiting with their own children say they've felt a sudden cold hand grip their wrist, or have seen their child stop and laugh at something invisible, playing a game with someone only they could see. The atmosphere of Vicksburg is a strange one. The preserved buildings and orderly rows of cottonwoods give it a beauty not often found in ghost towns. Yet beneath that beauty lies a tension, as if the place is caught between past and present. The laughter of children carries with it a haunting contradiction, joyful in sound, but chilling in context, for it belongs to voices that should have long since gone silent. Some believe the children of Vicksburg remain not out of pain, but out of attachment. The town was their playground, their world, and perhaps they never wished to leave it. To them, the games, the lessons, and the streets lined with cottonwoods still exist, eternal and unbroken. To outsiders, it is a place where the veil between life and death is thin, where echoes of innocence linger in a place touched by hardship and loss. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, standing in Vicksburg as twilight falls is enough to make anyone listen closer. The wind stirs through the cottonwoods, the creak of old wood echoes through the empty homes, and then faint, but undeniable, the laughter begins again, carried on the mountain air. It is the sound of children long gone, yet never truly departed, forever haunting the quiet streets of Vicksburg. Nestled high in the remote reaches of the San Juan Mountains lie the twin ghost towns of Carson and Old Carson, 2 settlements that once thrived on the promise of silver and gold, but now exist only in whispers and shadows. Established in the late 1800s, these towns were bustling hubs of miners, shopkeepers, and families chasing the glitter of wealth hidden deep in the rugged mountains. But as quickly as the towns rose, they fell. Abandoned in the early 1900s, when the mines dried up and hopes turned to dust. Today, their decaying structures sit hidden among dense forests and jagged peaks, accessible only to the most determined explorers. And for those who do make the journey, The experience is as unnerving as it is mesmerizing. Visitors to Carson and Old Carson often report an almost immediate sensation of being watched. The air seems to thicken as soon as the ruins come into view, and shadows appear to move just beyond the corner of one's eye. Hikers and paranormal enthusiasts tell of darting figures slipping between the remnants of cabins and mine structures, vanishing before they can be confronted. The sense of surveillance is constant, as though the towns themselves are alive, observing intruders with an ancient, silent judgment. One of the most famous accounts comes from a group of explorers who spent the night photographing the ruins. As darkness fell, they claimed to witness a procession of ghostly figures moving through the main street of Old Carson. Lanterns glowed in their hands, casting flickering light on the weathered wooden buildings. The figures walked slowly, solemnly, their faces obscured by shadows, and when the explorers tried to approach, the entire scene evaporated into the night air. There was no trace left behind, not a footprint or a whisperone, the cold mountain breeze that seemed unusually heavy in its wake. Even more unnerving are the reports of time slips, moments when reality seems to bend around those who venture into the twin towns. Witnesses describe sudden silences in the surrounding forest, a heavy stillness that presses against the ears and chest. In these moments, the towns transform. Ruined buildings become fully intact, wagons creak down the streets, miners work tirelessly, and horses paw at the ground as if the town had never fallen silent. Observers feel entirely present in the 19th century, walking alongside figures who do not notice them, participating in a living tableau from a bygone era. And then, just as abruptly, it all dissolves. The horses vanish, the miners disappear, and the forest regains its cold, oppressive quiet. The transition is seamless, leaving explorers questioning whether they had witnessed a ghost, a memory, or something else entirely beyond explanation. Some of the more daring visitors have explored the mines themselves, though these are treacherous and unstable. Those who venture inside report hearing the rhythmic sounds of pickaxes striking rock, the echoes of men working in tight, dark corridors. Others have claimed to hear voices calling out instructions or laughter drifting through the shafts, though no one else is present. The tunnels seem to amplify every sound, and many emerge with a profound sense of unease, convinced they were never truly alone. The ruins of homes and businesses in Carson and Old Carson also carry their own stories. Windows reflect more than just the forest. Some explorers swear they see figures peering out, watching silently as they pass. Doors creak open on their own, floorboards groan under invisible weight, and occasionally, a fleeting shadow appears to dart across a cabin before vanishing into the trees. Some accounts suggest that these shadows are remnants of the townspeople themselves, trapped by the energy of their failed ambitions and untimely departures. One particularly chilling story involves a lone hiker who camped overnight near the ruins of Carson. Around midnight, he reported feeling a sudden, oppressive presence, accompanied by a dense silence that swallowed all forest sounds. He described turning to see a group of miners walking down the slope toward him, their lanterns glowing like dying stars. Their faces were obscured, but their movements were deliberate, purposeful. Terrified, he tried to flee, but the figures seemed to glide effortlessly toward him. When he finally scrambled to his feet and looked back, the miners had vanished, leaving only the remnants of a path that had never existed. Even during the day, the twin towns exude an aura of unease. The sunlight filtering through the pine trees casts long, twisted shadows that shift unnaturally with the wind. The silence is deceptive. It feels thick, almost sentient, broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird or the rustle of leaves underfoot. Explorers report an eerie sense that they are intruding on a private world, that the land itself remembers the lives once lived there and does not welcome outsiders lightly. Legends have grown to explain these strange phenomena. Some believe the twin towns are haunted by the souls of miners who died in accidents or were buried beneath rock and snow. Others claim the towns are trapped in a perpetual loop, caught between life and death, history and memory, allowing glimpses of a time when Carson and Old Carson were alive and thriving. Whatever the explanation, the towns continue to attract adventurers, photographers, and paranormal enthusiasts who hope to catch a glimpse of the past or, perhaps, to encounter something that defies time itself. For those who venture into Carson and Old Carson, the experience is unforgettable. The cold mountain air, the decaying buildings, and the strange, shifting shadows all combine to create an atmosphere that is equal parts beauty and terror. One can feel the presence of the past at every turn, the echoes of miners' work, the murmur of voices carried through the pines, and the faint, lingering scent of a town long abandoned. The twin towns of shadows are reminders of a Colorado long vanished, of ambition and life etched into a harsh landscape, and of spirits that refuse to be forgotten. Travelers leave with stories of figures in lantern light, of streets frozen in time, and of a world where the boundary between past and present is fragile. In Carson and Old Carson, the ghosts are never far, and the past is never truly gone. The mountains hold their secrets close, and those who seek them are forever changed. And there you have it, 10 of the most haunted ghost towns in Colorado, where history refuses to die and the spirits of the past still cling to the mountains. Each of these towns tells a story of ambition, hardship, and tragedy, but also of echoes that refuse to fade. Whether it's the chilling cries from Animas Forks, the ghostly miners of Ashcroft, or the watchful eyes of St. Elmo, the Rocky Mountains hold on to their secrets tightly. If you ever find yourself wandering these ghost towns, remember, you are not walking alone. The past may be gone, but in Colorado's high peaks and valleys, the line between the living and the dead is thinner than the mountain air itself. Thank you, my friends, for joining me on this haunted journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and never stop listening to the whispers of the forgotten.